Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily of Nature. Today's presentation, New Zealand Spring, Penguin Parades, Kiwi Hatchings, and Conservation Wins, is brought to you by Nat Hab Expedition Leader Sam Kuperus and his partner, Barnaby. A little bit more about our presenter. Sam began his career in the corporate world as a project manager before leaving to travel extensively throughout the Pacific, Europe, and Asia, where he developed a strong interest in sustainable tourism and wildlife. After returning to the island, he has spent the past several years guiding expeditions across New Zealand and working closely with the Department of Conservation. Sam joined Nat Hab in 2022 as an expedition leader and enjoys sharing his deep knowledge of the country's landscapes and conservation efforts with travelers. Thank you for being here today, Sam. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Brooke. And Barnaby's made it to the start of the presentation, but he's getting a little bit fiddly, so we might have to let him go. Yeah, I wanted to have a quick chat today about what's been happening so far this season, because we've made some changes to our tour. But also there's been a few awesome conservation wins that we've had that are great to share. So far this season, we've had 3 tours, and looking forward to giving you some insights about the conservation work that's happening in New Zealand that we've been involved with in different ways, and some of the projects that Nat Hab's been contributing to that are not announced anywhere else. In fact, there's so little information about some of these ones that I'm not sure if I'm allowed to tell you, or I might find myself writing the releases about them to go on the website. You've had enough, pup, I know. So a bit of an agenda for me. I want to talk about some of the new things that are happening on our tour this year that we've been enjoying. There's more cultural interactions and more penguins on our itinerary, which is exciting. We also get closer to a new Kiwi project on the West Coast. And the World Wildlife Fund have been particularly active in New Zealand with projects that I'm involved in outside of Nat Hab. So I want to tell you a little bit about that. And there's also some projects coming up that I'm going to be involved with that I look forward to sharing. And unlike most of the time when I talk on here, hopefully I'll leave plenty of time for questions at the end. And as a reward for questions, I'll share photos from our spring tours so far. Well, Brooke's already introduced myself, but I grew up in the South Island of New Zealand, studied at the university in Dunedin, where we start our tours from, did a lot of travel myself and have become quite passionate about the industry. I was just saying, I'm currently also marking exams for the tourism vocational school here in Queenstown that I teach economics at, as well as I do a bit of work for the Department of Conservation and so forth. And photo there is of a Kia that we saw on one of our trips this season. This Kia is called Ya Si, which is Arthur in Chinese. There's about 3,000 to 5,000 Kia in New Zealand. Unfortunately, we really don't know how they're doing population-wise. We do know they're down from 130,000 birds about 100 years ago. So in order to try and track these birds, they are tagged and logged in a database. So whenever we see Kia in New Zealand, we report the sighting to assist with tracking the population. The biggest contribution to their demise, there used to be a bounty on these birds. They would attack farm animals, and the government decided that this is blocking economic progress, and so a bounty was put in place. Fortunately, this stopped in 1971, and they've been protected, fully protected since 1986. Unfortunately, they're still very susceptible to lead poisoning, vehicle strike, poisoning from human food, predators, and that brings us to our first good news story for this year, which is that feral cats have been added to our Predator-Free 2050 project. So Predator-Free 2050 has been going for a few years now. The original task was to get rid of stoats or ermine, rats, possums from all of New Zealand. And as I said, we've now added feral cats to that list as well. Possums are a big challenge in New Zealand. It's estimated there's about 70 million possums in the country. They will ringbark trees and eat huge amounts of foliage off the trees every day, but they will also eat the eggs of young birds and even young chicks off the nest. So they have a big impact on our ecology, sadly. Stoats or ermine were introduced to control rabbits in New Zealand. Unfortunately, they are fantastic predators. They're very good at what they do, but they have a huge impact again on flightless birds that have evolved in an environment without mammals. Aotearoa, Stewart Island, that we visit on our itinerary, has just started their clearance project. They are trying to remove these species from 350,000 acres of continuous forest. If they can clear one of these species from that forest or from that island, that would be the largest continuous eradication anywhere in the world. So it's going to be a huge achievement, even just to help on Stewart Island, let alone the rest of New Zealand. But not only would this project help save the kea, it also helps save all our other species, especially things like our penguins. New Zealand is home to 15 of the 18 penguin species in the world. On our tours, we hope to see 3 species in the wild. Penguins evolved from a tall water bird called waimanu that lived in New Zealand about 60 million years ago, just a couple of million years after the extinction of dinosaurs. In fact, fossils of waimanu are so old they are providing evidence that birds existed alongside the dinosaurs, although it is unlikely this particular bird could fly since they had a dense bones to allow them to swim underwater. Waimanu was big, but penguins continued to get bigger, including one which stood over 6 feet tall and weighed over 250 pounds. More recently, the coastline in New Zealand of the South Island was home to a penguin called waitaha. They went extinct shortly after Polynesian people arrived in New Zealand, likely hunted to extinction about 500 years ago. With their extinction, the yellow-eyed penguin moved in. The yellow-eyed penguin are the oldest lineage of penguins and the only species of the Megadaptes genus still surviving. But sadly, they are in real trouble. Populations of the South Island have collapsed by 80% since 2008, from 739 breeding pairs to just 143 breeding pairs in 2025. There are still yellow-eyed penguins on the subantarctic islands, bringing the total population to just under 3,000 birds. In the wild, less than 30% of yellow-eyed penguin chicks will leave the nest. Those that leave, only 20% will reach breeding age. They're incredibly susceptible to a respiratory disease called a respiratory distress syndrome, which is a gyrovirus and kills about a quarter of the chicks, and another disease, diphtheria stomatis. As a result of this, we've taken very strong measures, and now every egg or chick is removed from the nest that's born on the South Island, and it is brought to the Dunedin Wildlife Centre for treatment for both of those diseases. Fortunately, eggs and chicks can be substituted for a dummy egg, and treated birds can be returned to the parents without issue. It is possible to foster chicks with new parents, but coloured tape bands are put around the flipper of each of the 97 chicks recovered this year to ensure they are returned to the correct parents. A telling story, because the year before, 158 chicks were treated, a more than 30% reduction since last season. One of the most tedious parts of caring for these birds is making up the fish smoothie to the right consistency to feed the chicks. It currently takes 5 months to prepare the food for a season for the chicks, juvenile and adult penguins that come through the hospital. Some 500 pounds of seafood smoothie is required, which is a mixture of 5 different types of fish, that get blended and sieved into the right consistency that is both digestible and syringeable for the chicks. If it works, I've got these little chicks here in the hospital. These are sort of week-old yellow-eyed penguin chicks in the Dunedin Wildlife Hospital there with their foster mum teddy bear for company. And so last year, the Dunedin Wildlife Hospital received funding from the Natural Habitat Foundation for their general running costs. This year, they've received funding for more than half of the cost of the new penguin smoothie sieve from the Natural Habitat Philanthropy Fund. And so this is an example of how your travel with Natural Habitat is directly helping to save a highly endangered species. World Wildlife Fund is also very active with yellow-eyed penguins. They are campaigning the government for more regulation in the fishing industries. Unfortunately, net fishing claims a lot of penguins. The government has announced an extension to a temporary 3-month net fishing ban near Dunedin, extending that to a 12-month ban on net fishing off the coast. And this is where a lot of the yellow-eyed penguins live. While this is still a temporary measure and only a small area, it is at least a step in the right direction. While we can't yet visit the wildlife hospital, we do see penguins on our tours. In particular, we see the hoiho, or yellow-eyed penguin, at the Otago Peninsula Ecological Restoration Alliance in Dunedin. Occasionally, we see them in the wild, but often it's in their rehabilitation centre. The Opera is a former profit farm that's now a non-profit, where they're restoring the land and reforesting and creating a predator-free habitat for the penguins, yellow-eyed penguins and little penguins to breed at, and as well as the other marine and land-based animals who call the peninsula home. Again, by visiting the Opera on our itinerary, we support their work and it enables the restoration of this land. The photo of the yellow-eyed penguin in the top right corner there is in the rehabilitation facility. And when we're looking for penguins, the important thing for us is to understand their life cycle. And most penguins are raising their chicks in the spring, which means they're coming and going from the land, heading out to sea regularly and fishing close to the shore. So spring has been a great time for us to look and see penguins along the way. As I said, we're not allowed to visit the Dunedin Wildlife Hospital, but they've sent me some photos and videos here. This one here is a baby yellow-eyed penguin hatching in their incubator facility. And as I said, once this chick is healthy, they'll be able to go and put that back on the nest with its parents. And I've got a little video from the hospital here as well.
My name is Emily, and I'm a vet nurse here at the Wildlife Hospital in Dunedin. And I'm in charge of creating a lot of the diet for our patients. Thanks to Nat Hab Philanthropy for your support in this hoiho early chick management program as part of the Feed Me, Save Me campaign. Your support will help save thousands of hours, 4 to 5 months of diet prep, and condense it all down into about 2 days of work. That support is going to help this season and the next season and also future seasons to come. I'd love to extend a big thanks on behalf of the Wildlife Hospital of Dunedin, the wildlife capital of New Zealand.
So there you go, having an impact with saving a species, which is fantastic. Yep. There we go. One of the other penguins that we get to see and often get very close to is the Fiordland crested penguin. The population of these guys is about 7,000 birds, which makes them the 3rd rarest penguin in the world. Still below the African penguin, which has lost about 80% of its population over the last 30 years to starvation as well. Fiordland crested penguins are only found on the southwest coast of New Zealand and the Southern Islands. We get some wonderful sightings of these birds during their chick raising. There is a secret beach we visit on the west coast where we sit and watch the birds coming and going, always staying for 90 minutes, again as part of a piece of citizen science. For over 36 years, guests of the Wilderness Lodge, including our groups, have been taken to this beach during September through to December to observe and monitor Fiordland crested penguins. These observations show that the predator control on land is helping protect the birds, who this year had an 85% nesting success rate, and over the 36 years of observation, the population is gradually increasing in protected and undisturbed locations. The West Coast is protected using aerially deployed 1080 over some 370,000 acres of rugged terrain. 1080 is a poison compound that targets mammals. It was actually developed to target coyotes in particular, but it breaks down in water and we spread it by helicopter. It's one of our main control methods for trying to eradicate predators around New Zealand. And I promise more penguins. We see little penguins throughout our itinerary. They are found in New Zealand and Australia. They also go by fairy penguin or blue penguin or korora or Eucalypta minor. This season we've seen them on their nests at sea and very recently at a brand new display on the west coast. This is so new it wasn't even open for my September tour, but those of us who have got to visit have had a treat. These penguins wouldn't survive in the wild and ordinarily would have been euthanized. Fortunately, this new habitat is giving 7 birds a second chance and promoting their conservation. The problem we now face is pulling ourselves away to visit other things. I've got a little video there, and you can see some of the injuries these little penguins have got are quite horrific. Poor Devon trying in vain to get the birds to come over for their feeding. So they're obviously having too much fun swimming. Also on display at the centre for us to see are Kiwi and Tuatara. The Tuatara is a reptile whose lineage goes back almost 250 million years. They are the only surviving sphenodon. They look like lizards, but they are not. They are reptiles. They have 3 eyes, fused teeth, and a heart that beats only once a minute. Sadly, they're only found on offshore islands and reserves, while rats and mice inhabit the main islands. Another new thing this year, the Wildlife Centre are raising Kiwi chicks. Eggs are collected off the nest and sent to the facility for incubating and raising. This project was stopped pre-COVID as the Roe Kiwi, which was a local Kiwi population that they were looking after, had started to stabilize, and predator eradication was such that their support was no longer needed. This season they are raising another struggling variant of Kiwi, the Haast tokaweka, of which there are about 500 in the world, and so far this season 2 chicks have hatched. While we don't get to see them in person, we do a behind-the-scenes tour and learn about the process. We do get to see their 2 North Island brown Kiwi, Tiu and Sammy. These birds are staying at the centre until they're about 1 year old, when they will be big enough to protect themselves from mammalian predators and can be released into the wild. Just last week, we had more exciting Kiwi news. 2 little spotted Kiwi chicks were born to join the cluster of 7 birds discovered on the west coast earlier this year. The adult birds were discovered only a few months ago. Previously, they were known to be surviving on predator-free remote islands only, not seen on the main islands for more than 50 years. So to find any was amazing. To have 9 birds is incredible. To find chicks is miraculous. As these birds are much smaller kiwi, they will take 2 to 3 years to be big and strong enough to defend themselves from mammals. Therefore, the Department of Conservation have removed the chicks to a safe haven until they're strong enough to return to the wild. The kiwi on Stewart Island have also been having a great season. On our second night of the itinerary, we go out looking for kiwi. At this time of year, the new chicks are only a few days old and are out running around in the grass, practicing looking for food. Kiwi are born with a yolk sac that nourishes them for the first 2 weeks of life while they get to grips with finding their own food. Spring, while the ground is damp, has been a great time to look for kiwi, and we've had some wonderful sightings. Just last week, Judy and her group saw 7 kiwi. They use their delicate beaks to probe the ground for worms and insects, which is easier when the ground isn't baked dry. At that time, the birds move into the forest to look for food or look for insects amongst the leaf litter. Kiwi aren't sociable animals. They're very independent from birth, so much so that there is not a name for a collective of kiwi. But on Stewart Island, the population is denser, and so they form family units, which leads to some incredible interactions, like this one here we had in November. I'll play a little video, so make sure your brightness is up. And this red light is very typical of how we see kiwi. Their eyes are very sensitive, and so we don't want to put white light on them that might affect their eyes. And this is 2 young birds playing together that'll be of the same family. And we don't know why they do this playing dead type of thing, collapsing on the ground. Maybe they're being submissive with each other. Maybe they're being just clumsy. They haven't even got T-Rex arms. They do have a little vestigial wing. Or maybe they just run out of puff like sea lions do. Oh. These mammals were hunted to extinction from our main island during the sealing and whaling that ended in the 1830s after it became uneconomic. These are young bachelor males working out their hierarchy. Sea lions are moving back into human-populated areas, which is creating some conflict as we learn to live together again. By the way, these animals are about 100 feet away on Over Island from us on the beach. When fully grown, the males will weigh about 1,000 pounds. I won't say anything more about these guys because I know Jacob Emerson, one of our other expedition leaders, is preparing a presentation on seals, sea lions, and dolphins that he's going to be presenting on the 1st, or I think it's our 1st of January, your 2nd of January. I've already announced one of Natural Habitat's philanthropy projects, and now I've got another one in collaboration with the Department of Conservation, Eco Wanaka Adventures and Natural Habitat Adventures. Monitoring cameras on Moaho Island are being upgraded with a direct feed to shore-based monitoring teams, allowing real-time monitoring and reaction to identified threats on the island. Moaho Island is a mammal-free island, and as such, it's ideal habitat for weka, weta, and other wildlife. Weka are curious animals, seemingly lacking any instinctive fear of humans or other predators, which means that even a single rat or stoat can devastate their populations. This is Michael, one of the local guides on the island, explaining the cameras to a Nat Hab group last week.
mayonnaise in there. Every hour or so, just drips out a little bit of mayonnaise to draw in the musculars both in the ear. Just on the tree beside me here, we can see the game camera set up. Yeah, pointing at the bait station there. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the funding that's come from the likes of yourselves, this is what we've set up off the camera. So instead of the dock rangers having to come out constantly, to remove the cards, the SD cards, it's now got the white box on top. So as soon as it detects something coming in and investigating the bait, it will use AI. It will identify what's getting attracted to the bait, and it'll send it back to town as well. They don't no longer have to come out there to check every single card. So it is sending those signals straight back to town material perception out here places, and it's just sent via.
So it's sending over the mobile network there, and what that means is that as soon as something's detected, the Department of Conservation can act on removal of a predator that swam over to the island. As opposed to now, they might only get to the island every 2 or 3 weeks or even longer, check the SD card and then find there's a threat. Well, by that time, it may already have had a significant impact on the population and they've still got to catch it. If a mammal is detected, the game gets very tricky. Curious Weka will investigate any bait or poison well before a neophobic rat will. Often rats and stoats are also very trap shy, especially when food is bountiful. So conservation workers need to stay on the island and wait for the Weka to go to bed. The Weka is the brown bird in the photo and the little grey fluff ball there in the photo. And waiting for them to go to bed is no easy feat because they stay up very late and get up very early. Once they've gone to bed, they can put out a poison, hope that the rats take to it, and then they need to remove the poison before the Weka wake in the morning, which is an incredibly small window. And Weka will not only steal things from campers, they will keep you up all night. It's exciting to see the protection in place here and the continued restoration of the ecology. Moaho Island is in the middle of Lake Wanaka, in the middle of the South Island of New Zealand, which gives me an opportunity to mention some of the work that the World Wildlife Fund is doing in New Zealand. Last year, they made donations to the protection of the crested grebe on this lake. These incredible birds were made famous by John Oliver. They were struggling to nest as they cannot walk well on land. With changing lake levels, the nests were being washed away or becoming inaccessible. Fortunately, retired zoologist John Darby saw the problem and did something about it, building floating nest platforms. As a result, the population has taken off, increasing by 50% over the last 10 years, and this technique is spreading to other areas. World Wildlife Fund has been active just over the hill in Queenstown, where I live as well, with the restoration of a braided river habitat at Tuckers Beach. This project was initiated during the COVID times, where shovel-ready projects were funded to create jobs and improve the country by the government. Unfortunately, that initial government funding has now ended, and the World Wildlife Fund has stepped in to support the local trusts who are continuing the restoration and maintenance work alongside volunteers, such as myself, pictured here moving mulch around the trees planted in the restoration. What you can't see is the rabbit-proof fence around this patch of new forest to give the trees a start before the rabbits invade. Barnaby, that you met at the start of the presentation, also helps with the volunteering, keeping an eye out for rabbits inside the fence, as well as helping mulch up any large branches that he finds inside the fence. Braided rivers are a special habitat found only in New Zealand and North America. A combination of soft rock and glaciation is required to create the habitat. What it leaves behind is a shifting island habitat of small plants and insects. The islands give security that, combined with camouflage, becomes the breeding ground for some of our rarest species, such as birds like the wrybill, whose beaks bend to the right, there's about 3,000 to 4,000 of those in the world. Black stilts, there's only about 200 or 300. Our black-billed gull, there's about 50,000 black-billed gulls that nest in our riverbeds, which sounds like a lot, but they've had an over 50% decline in the last 50 years. And banded dotterels also nest in the riverbeds. There's about 50,000 of those, but again, they're declining. Restoring the habitat not only looks after the species, but also helps show the value of the land and hopefully prevents further encroachment on ecosystems such as this as Queenstown expands. Unfortunately, walkers and dogs unrealizingly use the riverbeds, further endangering these nest sites. So education and beautification are making great improvements in human behavior as well by showing people where to go and what's appropriate. Another project I've been involved in this year is the Takahe Recovery Program. I spent a week volunteering with the Takahe earlier this year at their breeding facility where birds were overgrazing the paddocks. So we needed to put breaks into the paddocks to allow restoration of the tussock grasses in that facility. Fortunately, the team involved in this was able to release Takahe into the Reese and Greenstone valleys over the last 24 months, and that's taken the pressure off the breeding facility so that they can restore it. Most notably, they released about 50 birds up into the Reese Valley, and those birds are now happily breeding and doing fairly well. In fact, they're enjoying their habitat and wandering around and exploring. So when Brad Pitt was here recently filming a Heart of the Beast, I think it was called, the Department of Conservation had to be on site monitoring these birds with their GPS trackers to make sure they didn't wander into the film set. That film, I think, is meant to be set in Alaska. And if you can see a big blue and green bird waddling around in the back of the shot, it'll perhaps give the game away that they weren't where they said they were. When you fly into New Zealand, you may see the safety video currently features the Takahe birds. They're really unique birds. They are flightless as well. We thought they were extinct for over 50 years. They were rediscovered in 1948 in the mountains of the Fiordland National Park, and that has started a 70-year breeding program to try and restore the species. They're now up to around about 540 birds, and the challenge we face at the moment is having safe and appropriate habitat to release them into. So being able to release them into the Reese and Greenstone valleys is wonderful. Another thing in the breeding center that we were working with is a particular fern called Hypolepsis millefolium. And this particular fern, the Takahe dig up the roots of it in the winter as their food source. So in summer they eat tussock grasses and seeds. In the winter they dig up the Hypolepis ferns. And they need to be taught how to do that by an older bird. So they have to put them into a small enclosure with lots of this fern in and no other food, and the adult birds will start to pick away and dig out that fern, and the younger birds will learn how to do that. So we spent some time in the paddocks that had that fern, and we were digging out anything else that was growing too well to give the Hypolepis a bit of a chance so that they could have plenty of that to feed out the young birds before they were released into the wild. Next up, I am off to an island called Whenuaho, off the bottom of the South Island. It's off Stewart Island. And Whenuaho Island, you can only go if you're working on a conservation project. It's completely closed off to visitors. And the reason that we're heading down there is that a bird called the kakapo lives on this island. Kakapo are a night parrot. They are a flightless parrot. They were almost completely extinct. The population got down to about 30 birds. And now the population is up to 241 birds. Each of those birds have names, as do the takahe, individual names, but they are also the first species in the world to have all of their genomes mapped. Every single living bird has had their genome mapped as part of the conservation effort of that species. One of the challenges with such a small population is you start to run into issues with inbreeding of the birds, and when they are inbred, then they become infertile. And so by mapping the genetics, hopefully finding the best matches and finding which birds will be good combinations in order to create fertile offspring as well. So looking forward to going down there. The reason that they need volunteers on Whenua Island at the moment is that this year the rimu trees are going to mast. So rimu is one of our native trees, and when it goes through a mast year, it produces maybe 10 times as much fruit as it would produce in a normal season. And that is the kakapo's cue to breed. So only every sort of 3 or 4 years will the kakapo try and breed, and this is one of them. So we're sending volunteers down to the island in order to supplementary feed the birds so that they are feeling even more healthy and more likely to successfully breed and so forth. So I am actually heading down there on the 30th of December for 2 weeks to help out with that program that runs for about 12 months of continuous feeding and monitoring of those birds as they go through the cycle. So as I said, 241 of them in the world. We tried to bring some of them into a predator-free enclosure up in the North Island so that the public could see kakapo. And that proved to be really challenging. We build these predator-free fences to keep things out from getting in and protect the species, but the kakapo were able to climb the trees and kind of parachute out of them despite being flightless birds. So I think most of those birds have been now returned to offshore islands to keep them safe. To conclude, I've got a little Maori proverb for you there. Ka ora te whenua, ka ora te tangata. When the land is well, we are all well. And I think that's all I've got planned. So, Brooke, was there any questions for us?
Oh, great, Sam. That was so inspiring to see how much progress is being made on the island of New Zealand and surrounding areas. So thank you. And also, thanks for highlighting Nat Hab's philanthropy projects that we've helped fund throughout the years. I love that. Yeah, everybody, if you go to our website under conservation, you can see those programs that Sam was mentioning. So, so great that you were able to highlight those. So thank you for that. All right, everyone, we have quite a lot of time with Sam here, which is exciting. If you have any questions, please go ahead and pop them in your control panel there, and we will get through as many as we can until the top of the hour. All right, here. Is it possible to see little blue penguins during our trip?
Yes, absolutely. So officially they're meant to be little penguins now, not little blue penguins, but that's too confusing. So yes, we often see them at the opera on our first day in their nesting boxes. They're a little bit hard to see in the nesting boxes, but we do get to see them quite close in that situation. And then on Stewart Island on our pelagic cruise, we sometimes see them out in the bay while they're out fishing and doing their thing. And at night on Stewart Island, they come up on the rocks near the jetty, and we get to see them sometimes in the evening climbing up the rocks, coming back to their nests. They usually come up onto the rocks just on dusk, just when it's getting too dark to take a photograph, and even getting very dark to see them with our eyes. But usually we can sort of make out those little penguins coming up the rocks. And again, now that we've got this new facility on the west coast, we'll see those birds that were swimming in the pond, in the pool there. We'll get to see them up nice and close on the west coast.
Oh, fantastic. That is great news. Do you mind putting up that quote again really fast? Someone asked if they could reread that we were saying that you had up there for a second. There you go. Thank you. There you go.
The Maori language is very phonetic. So it wasn't a written language until Europeans arrived in New Zealand. And so they just started writing down what they heard, which is great for our pronunciation, in that it's usually sort of said how it's written. We do kind of Spanish vowels, I would say. So R, A, E, or U, as opposed to perhaps a more English way of saying the vowels. And the WH is an F sound.
Wow. If only all languages were like that, right? You could just read it and say it.
Yeah.
Oh, great. We do have a couple of questions about rabbits. Is New Zealand rabbit free, and is the aim to make New Zealand mammal free?
Right. Is New Zealand rabbit free? Definitely not. Rabbits were introduced to start a fur trade or a fur industry well over 100 years ago. Unfortunately, they bred like rabbits, and there's no predators in New Zealand natively that would control that population. So the rabbit population exploded, and the government was forced to do something about it. And what they did was they thought the sensible thing to do here is bring in a predator. And so they started to introduce the mustelids, stoats, ferrets, weasels. Stoats you would call, I think, ermine. Fantastic predatory species. They chased a few rabbits around, but unfortunately, when you introduce these mammalian predators, they've had a massive impact on native species that don't fly and aren't used to being predated by mammals. They've adapted or evolved to use their camouflage and defend themselves from other birds attacking from the sky, as opposed to a threat from on the ground using a nose and whiskers and other things. So it's been absolutely devastating, the introduction of these predatory species. There's not a project to remove all the rabbits. Occasionally, different viruses are snuck into the country to try and control their population. Rabbit calicivirus, for example. Unfortunately, that's never achieved eradication, and so there's ongoing controls through different poisoning and shooting and hunting and things like this, but the rabbits are still there. The second part of the question, is there a plan to make New Zealand mammal free? The plan for predator free 2050 is to get rid of the mustelids, the possums, the rats, and now feral cats. Potential challenge of this is it's not planning to remove mice. And the fear is, if you start to take away the predators for the mice, maybe we'll end up with plagues of those instead. And obviously there's lots of farming in New Zealand. We're never going to get rid of the farm animals that we have and the likes of those, but certainly we're hoping to remove some of those major predators from the ecosystems. Rabbits aren't a pest in terms of our native ecology. They're a pain in terms of farming and economic issues. Mice are a problem for, they'll eat the native insects and also the lizards and the other reptiles like the tuatara. So that tuatara that I mentioned goes back 250 million years. It's a sit and strike predator. It's got an incredibly low metabolism. It doesn't move fast. It doesn't go far. It tends to stay sort of within 5 feet of its burrow. And if it senses a danger, it'll run back to its burrow where it'll be safe from a bird attacking from above. Unfortunately, that doesn't work for rats and mice. And so while there's still, even if we get rid of the rats, even if there's still mice in New Zealand, unfortunately, animals like the tuatara won't be safe on the main island until we get rid of the mice as well. They'll excuse this, but they'll literally be eaten alive because they can't defend themselves short of running into their burrows.
Great.
How do we go?
Thanks for that further explanation. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit further on how removal tactics are chosen? Like, poison can be very controversial. Like we have somebody in the audience here that doesn't like poison and is kind of asking why that might be chosen versus other methods. So could you explain a little bit further of how these things come, like these projects come to be, and why certain methods are chosen over others?
Yeah. So around towns and accessible areas, there's a certain amount of trapping that gets done. Trapping has a really low success rate, less than 1% of predators, in this case, that walk past a trap, less than 1% will go into a trap. So they're really unsuccessful. The next challenge, once that trap has been triggered, it is useless until you can next go back and check on it. So if you're in a very remote area, then it's very difficult to be covering the sort of terrain and covering the distances. The amount of traps and the amount of walking time would just be impossible for us to monitor. We do try and do it, particularly on ridge lines and things where if the predators have been eradicated from one area, they'll run trap lines along the border of that to stop reinvasions or try and prevent reinvasions, but it's simply not scalable enough to take on the project that we need to take on. There are traps that are self-resetting, and there are traps that can send signals that they've been triggered, but again, you've then got to send someone up to change the baits or check the trap if it's been manually triggered, and it's still a costly, incredibly time-consuming project. It just doesn't scale. There are research and plans and things being put in place to try and come up with methods to perhaps sterilize some of those species and stop their spread in this way. Unfortunately, we're not there yet with the technology. We want to have something more specific for these species as well, or a virus that we can release to them. And I understand that this type of technology has been developed, but what we don't have is a way to stop it from continuing to decimate the species. The risk then is that if one of these viruses, for example, was to get across to Australia that attacks possums and was to take out their possums, they would be very upset about it because they're a natural part of their ecology and an endangered species over there. So we need a way of being able to control these viruses as well as the viruses to be specific. And we know that viruses will get across borders because those viruses that we talked about to control the rabbits, they were smuggled into New Zealand in the first instance also. So I guess the answer to the question is as much that we don't want to be using the poison, but unfortunately it's the best thing we've got at the moment in order to achieve this. The particular thing that we use targets the mammals, the idea being that it has less of an impact on our birds, and that's proven to be the case, although it's not 100% perfect in that as well. There is a risk of secondary kill for birds picking up a carcass or something like that, but fortunately things like our native falcon will only attack and eat live prey, so it's somewhat minimized, but it is definitely an issue, and it's not something we're happy about, but it's the best we've got. And it is absolutely controversial, particularly for hunters, because deer will eat the poison pellets. Again, deer are an introduced species, and we need to control the numbers because they'll graze all of the forest floor and stop any regrowth in the forest, as well as eating ferns and other things. But that's a different conversation. And so hunters obviously get very frustrated because that they can't go hunting and trust that the meat will be safe to eat if this has been deployed for a certain period. And another challenge with the scopes and trapping is that if they get a fright and don't get trapped, they'll never go into a trap again. and then the stoats or the mustelids will teach their young, teach their kits to avoid the traps, and so you'll never capture those animals in that method. Hopefully I've covered everything there.
Yeah, wow, yeah, just incredibly intelligent animals. Wow.
Mm.
And you did mention there briefly about hunters, and we do have a couple questions about that. How are hunters involved in this? Or do they also help with rabbit and possum populations?
Hunting possums is still a little bit of a thing, but financially it's not always great. Possums are sought out for their fur. It has a really hollow fiber that when combined with, say, merino wool or another wool product, makes a really warm garment and incredibly soft. But again, it's not necessarily a scalable enterprise to be out in the forest looking for these things and bringing them out. But hunters do definitely target possums from time to time, and there are businesses that take out possums and rabbits, and Barnaby's dog roll is in part made out of possum as well. Sorry, what was the second part of that question, Brooke?
Oh, it was just asking about hunting about rabbits and possums.
Yeah, so it does happen, but not on a scale that achieves significant gains. Possums were controlled to protect agricultural industries because they carry tuberculosis or can carry tuberculosis. And so farmers have always had an interest in keeping their numbers down and keeping them away from the farms. What would happen is the possum comes down, and if it's sick, it's walking on the ground, and the cows are very curious. And so cows will come up and sniff the possum and still not sure what's going on, so they give it a big lick. And then you end up with tuberculosis in your herd. It is also something, I think there was a case 2 or 3 years ago where a hunter who was out in the forest working with possums managed to catch tuberculosis from possums as well.
Wow, talk about zoonotic transfer, disease transfer. Wow. Example A right there. That's crazy.
Yeah.
On a little bit of a lighter note, we have a viewer here asking if you have a photo of a cockapoo in your presentation.
I do not have one. I've never seen one myself. They're all on offshore islands. There is a plan to bring a kakapo to the Dunedin Museum and have it on display and alive in Dunedin from, I think, April this year. So come to New Zealand early, come to Dunedin early. We always like you to do this because you know, there's always a chance of a flight delay, but it gives you some time to acclimatize, and hopefully if that kakapo is in the museum, you'll be able to, in its enclosure, you'll be able to go and see one for yourself. There is an amazing video of a kakapo that meets Stephen Fry. You might be familiar with Stephen Fry. He's an actor and a British comedian. He was working on a series called Last Chance to See. So I'll go back even further. Douglas Adams, who wrote the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, he went out with a guy called Mark Cowardine, and they traveled around the world visiting some of the animals for the last time that were going extinct, grey rhinos and river dolphins. And he came down to New Zealand and saw the kakapo. And unfortunately, Douglas Adams died very young, but Stephen Fry then went out with Mark to go and check on these animals something like 20 years later and make a little TV series about it. And they went off to the predator-free island of Whenuaho that I'm visiting, and they met a kakapo called Sirocco. Sirocco was the last kakapo that was hand-reared or hand-fed. And as such, he's become somewhat imprinted on humans. And so he was quite partial, and he actually jumped on the cameraman's head and tried to make baby kakapo. So if you want to see a video of those guys, look up Sirocco or kakapo with Stephen Fry, and there's a wonderful video. The pictures on the screen at the moment are the kia, which is one of our other parrots. So we've got the kia, kaka, and kakapo. They're all about a similar size. These kia, fiercely intelligent, quite thick feathers to stay warm up in the mountains. The kakapo is a lighter greener color and a chonkier bird. he's decided that fat reserves were his advantage to keep surviving, as opposed to intelligence and going into the mountains.
That's great. That's great. Oh, we have a comment asking if Sirocco died. Did that bird die? Do you know?
No, Sirocco is still around. Kakapo, I think, can live to be about 70 years old.
Oh,
He is still
wow.
around. We did lose another one recently that was called Richard Henry. Richard Henry was named after one of the conservationists, one of the first conservationists who realized what was happening with the predation of these birds and that they were being lost. And he devoted his life to removing the birds and putting them onto a predator-free island. And unfortunately, his island was invaded by predators and his life's work was lost. But he at least put the idea out there and showed what could be done. And so the species was able to be saved using that methodology. But yes, Richard Henry, the kakapo, I think, died fairly recently.
Oh, great. Thank you for that. Oh, I love this question. We do have a guest asking if it's possible to volunteer for one of these projects before or after joining one of our trips.
Yeah, cool question. Maybe is the answer. So weirdly, the Department of Conservation don't do a lot of volunteering stuff, but they do, have different projects from time to time. And it is because there's not a lot of them, and working with these animals is quite special. And it is sort of a little bit of almost a competitive selection process. I certainly can't have any influence on that process myself of getting you in there. But if you were to have a look at the Department of Conservation website and search for volunteering, there are all manner of opportunities that come up there. A lot of it's looking after campsites and things like this. But if you happen to keep an eye on there and see an opportunity, you could by all means apply to be involved with that project and try and align it up with a tour. If you wanted to come to Queenstown and help move some barrels of mulch, I could probably arrange for that, but I suspect that wasn't quite the project you had in mind.
As we all know, for all those who have worked in conservation, it's not always the sexiest of fields, but all the work definitely needs to be done, right?
Yeah, and the department are very what's the word? Very keen for you to realize when you go and work on these projects that you may not even see the animal you're working with. So I'm going to go and spend two weeks on an island with, there's probably 100 birds of this particular species on the island. They're a nocturnal parrot, and we're not allowed to leave the camp unless we're going out for work. So, even for myself being on there for 2 weeks, there's every chance I'm not going to see a bird, and particularly because they're probably nesting at the time that I'm there, so they're going to be more reluctant to leave the nest as well.
Oh, this has been so great, Sam, and somehow we're down to just 20 seconds left of the webinar, so I will turn it to you for any last closing comments.
Oh, right. Oh, no, thank you very much, Brooke. No, great to have all your questions there, team, and thanks for sharing it with us, and hopefully a little bit more insight into some of the exciting animals that we have here in New Zealand, and look forward to seeing some more of you coming out to visit us here in New Zealand when you can. If you do want to see penguins, these field-and crested penguins are definitely more available for us to see in the spring. In the new year, they're going to go out to sea, fatten up, and then come back and do their catastrophic molt. So they're basically going to hide in a cave for a month while they replace all their feathers, and that's not a great time to try and find them, sadly. So thanks for listening, and tune into Jacob's presentation in a couple of weeks to learn more about these guys, the New Zealand sea lion and some of our other pelagic animals.
Yeah, Sam, thank you so much for taking the time to put together this amazing presentation today, and for also just really highlighting the amazing conservation work happening. And everybody, that presentation is scheduled for December 31st. So if you want to spend your New Year's Eve, if you are in the Western Hemisphere, or your New Year's Day, if you're in the Eastern Hemisphere, go ahead and spend that with us on the December 31st with Jacob. But again, Sam, thank you so much. And I would like to thank everybody who tuned in. If you're interested in information on how you can travel with Nat Hab, give us a call at 800-543-8917 or send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are more than happy to help you. Join us tomorrow for our next daily dose of nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and the replay will be available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody.